in 1914, Henry Ford made a decision that totally shook people. And that was that he was going to raise his workers' wages by $5. Now, when he announced the $5 workday and an 8-hour shift, people thought he was nuts. But this was a time when factory workers were basically not even making half of that, and they were working 9 to 12 hours a day. The conditions were rough. Like, this was a big change for worker health, worker safety, and newspapers thought it was reckless. Business leaders called it socialism. Like, it was unheard of. And Henry Ford, though, he knew that by taking care of his workers, not that he was a perfect person at all, because I think we all know that he was totally not perfect. Detroit was massively growing. We had immigrants from Europe. We had black families migrating north from the south. Farmers were starting to leave rural life in search of more money and more stability. It was not as seen in the farming industry. And so they came to Detroit to work. And that is Detroit. Like, we love to work here. So they started working at factories, but factory life was really tough. Like, it was something that was very taxing physically, emotionally, and it was something that people did because they knew it was a means to an end, but it definitely wasn't the definition of loving what you do. Times were very different back then. They had long hours, dangerous conditions, and the turnover was very, very high. So at Ford's Highland Park plant, the work was so tiring that Ford actually realized he needed to hire 3 workers to keep 1 job filled. And he knew it wasn't sustainable. The $5 day was not charity. I think we all know business owners don't just do things from the bottom of their heart. Like, Ford had a business to run. He wanted to make money. And he knew that in order to make more money, he needed to come up with a strategy that was radical. It was totally different than what anyone else thought. And that was, he came to the realization that a tired worker is an expensive worker. So turnover was killing productivity, training new people slowed down the line, quality suffered, and he believed that if workers lived decently, they could work better. And if workers earned more, they could buy Ford vehicles. Totally makes sense. He wasn't just creating jobs for people in the community, he was also creating his consumers. So on January 5th, 1914, the headlines were splashed across every newspaper. Ford Motor Company made it official. $5 a day, 8 hours instead of 9 to 12. And the reaction was crazy. Like, thousands of people flooded Detroit. People slept on sidewalks outside of Ford plants hoping to get a job. Other companies were laughing at them. But within a few months, Ford's productivity it went sky high. $5 a day and the 8-hour workday totally reshaped Detroit. People were buying homes. They were buying cars. Neighborhoods were forming. Schools were able to be expanded. Churches and shops and diners and barbershops, they all grew because people spent their paychecks there. And Detroit really became a city where a factory worker could build a stable middle-class life. And to be honest, that is still the case for many of our UAW workers here. We see it, they drive nice cars, they work hard, and they buy Ford vehicles if they work for Ford. If they're GM, they buy GM vehicles because there's that loyalty that comes from working for the company. But the idea was revolutionary back in 1914. To qualify for $5 a day, though, workers had their personal lives scrutinized. And this is something that a lot of people don't know. And it's kind of crazy to think that they were subject to searches. So inspectors would visit their homes. How often they drank was monitored. Immigrants were pushed to Americanize and lose their culture. Ford thought he was improving lives. But in order for people to get that paycheck, they had to surrender to some really weird forms of control that today nobody would really put up with. And thanks to social media and people being able to just put out what's happening, people don't deal with that as much anymore. Or it comes to light more easily. So Detroit grew, but it wasn't without tension. Over time, the $5 day, it didn't stay in Detroit. It changed labor standards around the world. And the 8-hour workday spread. Higher wages to be a competitive employer became a necessity. And then modern labor movements started to gain momentum. So it started as a really a movement on factory floors and it echoed across industries. Detroit has always been a city of workers. It's always been a city of builders and makers and people who show up and clock in. And that's one thing I love about the city. It's why it really has my heart. Thanks for listening to Motor City Aisha. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. And if there's a topic that you would love for me to talk about, drop it in the comments section below. Until next time.